South Park, a dark humor series released in 1997 that is still causing controversy to this day. And the coolest thing is that they always manage to stay updated and make critiques that really hit the nerve of society. But let's go back a bit in time, before 1997, before the first episode of the South Park series was released. And believe it or not, at that time, 2 episodes of South Park had already been released, and we can say they belong to Season 0, or, as I put in the title of the video, the lost episodes of South Park, and are not available on any official platform of the series. That's why I believe many people have never seen them or even know they exist. Well, maybe I exaggerated a little here, because technically, these episodes are not lost. If you search around the internet, you should find them, but with extremely low video quality and the audio in English. And that's why in today's video, we're going to take a look at these lost episodes and discuss a bit about the controversial topics that happen in them. The first episode of this Season 0 is called, in a loose translation, The Spirit of Christmas, Jesus vs. Frost. And here it's important to mention that, at the time this was released, they wanted to make a stop-motion animation. That's why both this episode and the next one I'll talk about were made by cutting pieces of paper in the shape of the characters and taking photos. That's why the animation was a bit weird, especially in this episode, where they hadn't yet created the final design for the main characters, because all of this was just a big test. The episode begins with these ugly boys here, who would go on to become Cartman, Stan, Kyle, and Kenny, who were singing while building a beautiful snowman. So, the character I think is Kyle wanted to put a magic hat on the snowman to bring it to life, which is a reference to an old animation where children give life to a snowman named Frost by placing a magic hat on him. However, Stan is almost certain that this character is Stan. He was totally against the idea and warns his friends that bringing the snowman to life was a terrible idea because his sister had done it in another town, and when it came to life, the snowman tried to kill her. In other words, Frost was an evil snowman and would not rest until he killed everyone who gave him life. But the boys didn't care about that story and brought the snowman to life anyway. And guess what? The thing turns into a demon and kills Kenny. And you didn't hear that wrong? He killed Kenny. Because in this version, the character shaped like Cartman is called Enny. Frosty, kill Kenny! Imagine if that had made it into the main series, with Cartman being called Kenny and dying in every episode. I think South Park would have been a completely different show than what we know. But anyway, after saying, "I told you so," to his friends, Stan decides to ask for help from the only person he believed could defeat Frost, Santa Claus. But guess what? That wasn't the real Santa Claus. It was actually Frost in disguise, and now he kills poor Kenny, or whatever name he had back then. But after seeing their 2 friends dead, Stan and Kyle decide to pray for help. And this is where it gets completely absurd because the boys were praying in front of a nativity scene. And who shows up to help them? A baby Jesus! A baby Jesus who kills Frost with the greatest ease in the world. Check it out. And so, everything goes back to normal. I mean, Cartman and Kenny died. But after all this catastrophe, Kyle and Stan learned about the true spirit of Christmas, which wasn't about Frost or Santa Claus, much less about Jesus, but about presents. And South Park is capitalist. Money, money, I just want money. And if for some reason you didn't like this joke about Jesus, I recommend you leave the video. You can leave. Goodbye. Because the next episode I'm going to talk about is much worse than this one. And if you stayed, the next episode is called The Spirit of Christmas, Jesus vs. Santa Claus. And here, we already have the classic design of the characters, just the way we know them, but the animation was still completely done in stop motion. And it all begins with the boys singing a lovely Christmas song, until they realized that Kyle was Jewish, and Jews couldn't celebrate Christmas. And if you're having some kind of deja vu with this, it's because they did something similar in episode 10 of the first season, where the boys start making fun of Kyle, saying that Jews couldn't celebrate Christmas. But while Kyle and Stan were discussing whether Jews could celebrate Christmas or not, Jesus appears to the group and comments that the next day would be his birthday. But terrible things were happening, and that's why he wanted help to get to a place called the shopping mall. And do you know what he wanted to do there? Confront Santa Claus since he believed the old man had completely ruined the true meaning of Christmas. Santa Claus even tries to defend himself, claiming that he only brought happiness and love to children, but Jesus didn't even want to hear that and argues that the date was only for celebrating his birthday. And do you know what these two do to come to an agreement? They simply decide to fight to the death, and the survivor would be the one who was right in the discussion. Seeing this crazy scene, the kids didn't know who to root for. In reality, they wanted to root for Santa Claus, but they thought it would be wrong to go against Jesus. And in the middle of all this crazy confusion, Santa Claus ends up killing poor Kenny. And so the fight between Jesus and Santa Claus leads nowhere because both were too strong. And so, to break the tie, they start asking the children for help, and at the same time, making threats, using presents and God, which only serves to confuse the boys even more and leave them not knowing what to do. And so, to clear their minds, they decide to stop and ask themselves, what would Brian Boitano do? And now I'm sure many of you are wondering, who the hell is Brian Boitano? Brian Boitano was a famous American figure skater who competed in the Olympics in the 80s and 90s. And this expression, what would Brian Boitano do, is a joke with the expression, what would Jesus do? Because since Jesus was in the middle of all this mess, the boys decided to think about what the most amazing person they knew would do. And that person, by chance, was Brian Boitano. In fact, in the movie South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, the boys end up singing a song about Brian Boitano's amazing feats. Want to see it? Check it out. But getting back to the story, as soon as the boys ask what Brian Boitano would do, the skater appears to share some of his incredible wisdom, and he explains to the children that they shouldn't worry about fights during Christmas, since this is a time when people's beliefs didn't matter. What really mattered was just being kind to each other. And after this magnificent advice, Brian Boitano leaves, and the boys manage to calm down Jesus and Santa Claus, pointing out that Santa Claus was responsible for keeping the Christmas spirit alive and bringing joy to people. And if it weren't for Jesus, Christmas wouldn't even exist. In other words, both are extremely important to the Christmas spirit. And realizing that this was true, the two calm down and make peace. And after all this mess, the boys learn a valuable lesson. And I'm not going to drag it out for you. It was exactly the same lesson as the other episode. What's important is just getting presents. Because remember, South Park is capitalist. Money, money, I just want money. So, did you already know these episodes of South Park? Let me know in the comments. I want to know. Maybe these episodes aren't as lost as I thought and everyone knows them. But if you liked the video, check out this one. Hurry up and go watch it. It's really good. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm out and see you in the next video.